The fire alarm went off at 6:43 a.m. in Warehouse 12, but not because of an actual fire. The system short-circuited trying to reconcile two identical orders sent to the same vendor from two different departments. Double billing, double shipping. Nobody noticed until pallets started showing up with the same SKU stamp twice. One marked Priority CEO, the other Urgent Strategy Team. That's when I knew Atlas was coughing. Not crashing, just coughing, clearing its throat in that quiet, ugly way before all hell breaks loose. I'm Austin Cooper, 47 years old, and I've been keeping this company's digital heart beating for 22 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 2 weeks earlier, I was sitting under my desk with a Red Bull in one hand and an Ethernet sniffer in the other, trying to figure out why Atlas had randomly decided that all January birthdays deserved paid time off. That wasn't a glitch. Was Eddie Rodriguez in payroll trying to rig the system again so his twins could go to Disney? I fixed it silently, logged it, let it go. That was the deal. I kept Atlas breathing, and in return, the company let me live in peace. No icebreaker games, no forced birthday cards, no meetings that could have been an email. Just me, my machine, and a jungle of code that looked like spaghetti cooked by a blindfolded raccoon. Atlas wasn't pretty, but it worked because I worked. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud, but I was necessary whether they knew it or not. I was the one who patched the procurement loop after their digital transformation failed in 2019. I was the one who built the back end that let HR pretend they understood metrics. I was the one who designed the routing system that kept late shipments from becoming customer complaints. But no, I didn't speak at town halls. I didn't wear designer suits. I didn't throw around words like synergy or disruption. So the executives forgot I existed. Only the staff on the third floor even knew what I looked like. Hunter Thompson in logistics called me the ghost in the wires. Grace Johnson in accounting once left me a sticky note that said, "Thanks for making the printer work again. You're the only reason I haven't stabbed Eddie with a letter opener." I kept that one. Put it on my fridge at home, right next to my daughter's college acceptance letter. Yeah, maybe my company card had a few charges labeled cybersecurity certification and zero-day mitigation workshop. And maybe I submitted them every quarter like clockwork, but no one questioned it. Not finance, not HR, not even the VP of Ops. Why? Because when Atlas hiccups, people lose bonuses. When Atlas fails, people lose jobs. When Atlas dies, well, we'll get to that. I started here when I was 25, fresh out of a community college program. Right after the post-9/11 business downturn when companies were desperate for anyone who could keep their systems running on shoestring budgets. Watched 3 different management teams come and go. Survived the dot-com crash aftermath, the 2008 recession, COVID shutdowns. Each time they'd talk about right-sizing and optimization, but they'd keep me because when the lights went out, I was the guy who turned them back on. I kept my world simple. Quiet updates at night. System reports routed through my console. Admin keys rotated weekly. And yes, I backed everything up off-site, triple encrypted, and tied to biometric access. You think I trust Brandon Miller from sales with access to anything past his Outlook calendar? Hell no. The man once clicked to win a Tesla pop-up and bricked his own laptop. Twice. They called the system Atlas because it held everything. Logistics, payroll, vendor timelines, internal ticket routing, budget syncing, shift rotations, compliance flags, even the snack ordering for the break room. Manufacturing floor connectivity, supply chain validation, regulatory reporting for 3 different government agencies. If you unplugged me, the lights would still be on, but nothing would move. You'd have a Ferrari with no key, no gas, and the engine password protected behind 3 firewalls and a smiley face sticker that said, "Try again." The whole thing was built on legacy AS400 backbone, with modern APIs I'd written to bridge the gap between what we had and what the executives thought they wanted. COBOL modules running manufacturing schedules alongside Python scripts handling vendor communications. It was beautiful in its ugliness, efficient in its chaos. Like a 1969 Camaro with a turbocharged engine, old-school reliability with modern performance. But nobody asked about Atlas. They just assumed it worked like magic. And I kept it that way until she showed up. Brooke Mason. If smugness were a perfume, she bathed in it. Platinum blonde, manicured within an inch of her soul, and newly hired into HR because nepotism is a ladder and her uncle owns half the building. Rumor was she'd gotten kicked out of her last job for trying to reorganize the diversity budget into a wine bar fund. But here she was, smiling like she knew how any of this worked, walking the halls like she built the server racks herself. MBA from some private school where they teach you buzzwords but not how anything actually works. She'd throw around phrases like digital transformation and agile methodology like they were magical incantations. The kind of person who thinks you can solve legacy system problems with a PowerPoint presentation and positive thinking. On her third day, she asked my manager, "Why is this Austin person expensing $18,400 on penetration testing frameworks?" To which my manager replied, "Because if he stops, our company gets penetrated, and not in a fun way." Brooke didn't laugh. She went straight to finance, straight to compliance, straight to the CEO. And I knew the minute I saw her print out one of my expense reports on pink paper and slam it on a conference table like she was dropping the Constitution, the countdown had started. 8 hours. The entire foundation would crumble in 8 hours. But I smiled anyway, because what she didn't know was that Atlas only answers to me. The meeting was supposed to be about Q3 morale strategies, a 2-hour PowerPoint about why a pizza party should make up for slashed bonuses. I showed up because the invite said mandatory, and I wasn't about to give HR a reason to pull some compliance rabbit out of a hat. I sat in the back like I always did, hoodie up, sipping black coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through an old sock. Nobody noticed me. Nobody ever did. Not until Brooke clicked to slide 7 and made my name the headline. "Let's talk about accountability," she said, smiling like a cat licking hot grease off a trap. The room stiffened. My name sat there in bold calibri, Austin C. Ongoing non-compliance with expense policy. I blinked. She didn't look at me. Not yet. She was feeding off the power of silence. "I conducted a review of recent expenses," Brooke continued, "and found multiple unauthorized charges from this employee who, as far as I can tell, operates completely unsupervised. Items that were never pre-approved by HR or finance. Training courses, security licenses, whatever he wants to call them." She had a printout, pink paper, naturally. "In the past year alone, Austin Cooper has charged $18,400 in so-called cybersecurity training. That's nearly 20% of our entire professional development budget spent by one person without proper authorization channels." The engineering manager shifted in his seat. He knew those weren't just courses. Those were enterprise-grade security certifications, penetration testing frameworks, zero-day vulnerability databases. The kind of tools that keep companies off the evening news when hackers decide to play. But he didn't speak up. Nobody ever did. "Furthermore," Brooke went on, "building steam like a defective pressure cooker, this employee has consistently bypassed HR protocols for continuing education. No supervisor approval forms, no learning objectives documentation, no post-training assessments. It's a clear violation of Company Policy Section 4.7.2. She turned to me finally. The room followed, neck by neck, like dominoes toppling toward a noose. "Austin," she said, "would you like to explain why you've been treating company funds like your personal Amazon account?" I could have explained. Could have told them about the SQL injection attempt I'd blocked last month using those tools. Could have mentioned the ransomware campaign targeting our industry that I'd helped 3 other companies defend against. Could have pulled up the compliance audit from last year where our security posture was rated exemplary specifically because of those investments. But I didn't. Because I realized something in that moment. They didn't want an explanation. They wanted a scapegoat. Someone quiet, unassuming, who wouldn't fight back. Someone they could cut to show the board they were optimizing human capital utilization. I said, simply. Brooke blinked. "Excuse me? I don't want to explain anything to you." The silence that followed was the kind you feel in your bones. 23 people holding their breath, waiting for the explosion. Brooke's smile flickered like a dying fluorescent bulb. "Well then," she said, recovering with the practiced ease of someone who'd rehearsed this moment in the mirror. "I've already cleared this with the CEO. Effective immediately, your employment with this company is terminated. Please surrender your badge and log out of all systems. A security escort will be provided if necessary." You ever hear a room hold its breath? You could feel the temperature drop. The air went still, like even the molecules were waiting to see if I'd cry, scream, beg, throw a stapler. Brooke stood there with her hands clasped like a smug Disney villain, thinking she just solved the company's biggest problem. I stood up calmly. No twitch, no tremor, just a slow rise and a glance around the room. Half the engineers looked like they'd swallowed their tongues. One guy from operations actually started typing on his laptop with it still half closed, probably updating his LinkedIn profile. Iris Taylor from Sales Ops was staring at me with something that looked like panic. She knew. Maybe not the technical details, but she knew that firing the guy who'd been quietly keeping everything running for 22 years was like removing the foundation while the house was still standing. I reached into my hoodie pocket, pulled out my ID badge, walked to the center of the room, and placed it gently on the long, glossy conference table next to the coffee carafe, like I was leaving a tip at a restaurant. Then I looked at Brooke, just once. "You have 8 hours," I said. She blinked rapidly. "Excuse me? 8 hours before everything stops running. Is that a threat?" Her voice pitched higher, uncertainty creeping in like water through a cracked foundation. "No," I said, already heading for the door. "It's a timeline." And then I walked out. No mic drop, no grand speech, just that simple statement hanging in the air like smoke. The elevator doors closed behind me with a soft chime, cutting off the murmur of confused voices. What nobody in that room knew, what Brooke never bothered to learn, was that Atlas didn't just run logistics. It was logistics. Payroll, dispatch, invoicing, deadline tracking, compliance alerts, supplier validation, manufacturing floor coordination, regulatory reporting, the invisible skeleton holding up everything they took for granted. And she had just fired the brainstem. I hadn't built it for power or job security. I'd built it because it needed to work. Because when something broke at 3 a.m., they called me. Because when the vendor database started throwing errors, I fixed it before the morning shift noticed. Because when compliance auditors showed up asking for reports that didn't exist, I made them exist, because no one else could. But Brooke thought I was just another quiet drone slurping corporate dollars to fund a Netflix subscription and some fancy certifications. She didn't realize those training courses were enterprise-grade security tools worth more than her car. She didn't understand that the licensing agreements were tied directly to my personal credentials, my biometric signatures, my decades of building trust with vendors who wouldn't deal with anyone else. No multi-user login, no admin override, no backup administrator. Just one name, one fingerprint, one irreplaceable human being who'd been quietly holding their world together while they collected bonuses and planned pizza parties. 8 hours. That's how long the final authentication cycle would take to expire. It wasn't sabotage, it was entropy. A natural system timeout triggered by the absence of the only person who knew how to reset the clock, and she had just deleted him from the equation. The elevator opened to the 3rd floor with a chime that felt louder than usual. Maybe it was just the silence in my chest. I stepped out and walked past the shared kitchen where Felix Anderson from accounting was microwaving another tuna melt. He saw me, looked like he wanted to say something, then didn't. Smart man. Word travels fast in office buildings, especially bad news. My cubicle was still the same. Stupid little cactus half dead on the windowsill. A bobblehead I'd glued back together after the office holiday party massacre 2 years ago. 2 coffee mugs, both mine, both stained like they'd been through war. I sat down and pulled out my backpack, started packing. No tears, no dramatic slamming of drawers, just the soft shuffle of pens and backup drives sliding into zippers. I heard whispers from behind the partition. Holly Davis's nervous hiss. Did he really get fired? Someone else mumbled, "He's the only one who ever helped with that ticket routing mess." Another voice. I thought he was the system. No one stepped forward. No one asked. That's the thing about offices. They'll watch you burn through the glass, but they won't tap on it. Liability, I guess. Brooke strutted in 15 minutes later like she was grand marshal of a parade no one asked for. She was walking too fast, like she wanted everyone to notice how efficiently she'd just handled a problem. Heels clicked with the smug cadence of someone who just made a list and crossed out the top item in Sharpie. She did a full loop past the engineering pit, waved at someone, then glanced toward me without stopping. That's when I knew she had no idea what she'd done. She thought she'd just trimmed a budget, checked a compliance box, proved she had executive instincts. She probably thought HR would be printing her commendation plaque by morning. I reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out a USB stick. It was black, no logo, no label, except for one thing: a strip of masking tape across the plastic with "Good luck" written in Sharpie. I set it gently on my chair cushion, right in the center. No drama, no fireworks, just a tiny, silent landmine. Inside that drive was every recovery procedure, every emergency protocol, every backdoor I'd built over 22 years. All password protected, of course. All tied to credentials that would expire the moment I left the building. I zipped up my bag, slipped on my jacket, and walked out with the kind of stillness you only learn after years of fixing broken systems in the dark. Didn't slam my locker, didn't look back, just pressed the elevator button and waited, listening to the faint hum of Atlas humming in the walls like a patient heartbeat. Atlas had 23 fail-safes, each one tied to a trigger. One of those triggers was my badge scan leaving the building without administrator handoff. The first domino. Brooke didn't know it, but she'd started a countdown disguised as efficiency. As I stepped into the elevator, Eddie Rodriguez from payroll called out, "Hey, Austin, wait, are you—" The doors slid shut before he could finish. Let him wonder. Let them all wonder. I descended in silence, the faint beep of each passing floor like the ticking of a quiet bomb. Not a big one, not explosive, just the kind that gently takes out a foundation. By the time I hit the lobby, my access badge had already deactivated. I walked past security with a nod, past the CEO's framed photo with the mayor, past the motivational poster that said, "Teamwork makes the dream work," next to the fire extinguisher I'd once used to stop a server from overheating during the quarterly inventory crisis last year. Out the glass doors and into the parking lot, the air was crisp. October in Ohio, leaves turning brown like old coffee stains. Freedom smells like road salt and dying leaves when you've been breathing recycled office air for 22 years. I didn't cry, didn't scream into the sky or kick over a trash can. I just sat in my car, pulled out my backup phone, and sent one message: trigger acknowledged, key rotation engaged, clock's ticking. Then I drove away. No plan to return, no exit interview, no follow-up call, but that USB stick, that was a gift. Or maybe a warning. Depends on who picks it up first. Hour one started with a missed shipment. Just one. A small freight truck loaded with regional product samples meant for the VP Summit in Chicago didn't leave the dock. The shipping label printed blank. The route manifest spit out a page filled with question marks and a single crying emoji. The warehouse manager, a guy named Dustin who'd been there since the Clinton administration, flagged it as a printer error and resent the job. Same thing. Then logistics tried rerouting through the backup queue. That's when the system told them the backup queue didn't exist. Or rather, it existed last week. Now it was nothing but a digital shrug. The whole platform redirected them to a deprecated error page I'd intentionally buried behind 5 layers of do not touch warnings years ago. Hour 2, payroll called down to IT. Not panicked, just annoyed. "Hey, half. Our disbursements are stuck in draft status. The other half disappeared. Gone. As in not submitted, not saved, not real." They tried to run the report again, got a timeout message, rebooted the console, got locked out, attempted to escalate to the backup administrator. Problem was there wasn't one. Never had been. I'd always meant to set up a secondary admin account, always meant to document the handoff procedures, always meant to train someone else on the critical systems. But there were always fires to put out, always urgent patches to deploy, always one more crisis that needed the guy who knew where all the bodies were buried. Atlas bounced back a cheery red banner. "Access denied. You are not the chosen one." That was one of mine. I'd written it half asleep during a patch cycle 3 years ago as a joke. Nobody ever changed it. Until now, nobody had ever seen it. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in that building, people were starting to realize they'd just fired the only person who knew how to make it stop. By hour 3, Brooke was holding a check-in with her change acceleration team, pretending nothing was wrong. "Just a few hiccups," she said, voice tight but confident. "Growing pains. Legacy system stuff." Her exact words were, "Let's not catastrophize minor glitches." That phrase would later be printed on mugs by several bitter staffers. Downstairs in IT, Caleb Williams was sweating into his gaming chair. He'd inherited my office, my systems, and the faint lingering scent of burnt coffee and stress. And now his console looked like a cursed video game. Every dashboard blinked red. Every ping returned static. Every recovery attempt was met with a smug wall that said, "Admin validation expired. Manual override required. Good luck." Up in sales ops, Iris Taylor, sharp, skeptical, always half a second from quitting, started piecing it together. Didn't Austin handle Atlas? Silence. I mean, wasn't he the admin? No one answered. Her intern whispered, "I thought he was like a ghost, like some AI thing." Iris stood up and walked straight to facilities, asked for a key to my old office, found it locked, called IT. No answer. Called legal. That's when the real panic started. Hour 4 brought the manufacturing floor to a standstill. The production scheduling module that coordinated 3 shift rotations across 2 facilities started spitting out contradictory orders. Line supervisors got instructions to build products that didn't exist using materials they didn't have. The quality control database that tracked regulatory compliance for our automotive contracts locked everyone out with a message that said, "Please contact your system administrator for assistance." That's when the union reps started making calls. When manufacturing stops, hourly workers don't get paid. When hourly workers don't get paid, unions get involved. When unions get involved, lawyers follow close behind. Legal tried to access compliance reports for a vendor contract audit due that afternoon. Atlas responded with a spinning wheel and then spat out a gif of a raccoon setting a trash can on fire. That was definitely mine, buried in the error handling routine as a stress relief joke during the 2019 migration. Hour 5, the CEO finally got pulled in. His calendar app had failed to notify him of his own board meeting. He walked into an empty conference room with no prep notes, no CFO, and no agenda. Just 5 spinning chairs and the slowly dawning realization that something was very, very wrong. By the time he stormed into the operations war room, Brooke was halfway through her latest excuse. "It's a legacy system," she said, arms crossed defensively. "Austin didn't document his work properly. We were set up to fail." "Austin was the documentation," said the CTO, who hadn't spoken all year. "We all knew that. You just didn't think it mattered." That's when they found the USB stick. Holly Davis from accounting had been brave enough to sit in my chair, looking for anything that might help. She picked up the black drive with the masking tape label and handed it to Caleb like it was a live grenade. He plugged it in with shaking hands. 37 folders, thousands of files, every recovery procedure, every emergency protocol, every backdoor I'd built over 22 years, all password protected, all tied to credentials that had expired the moment I left the building. The main README file was just one line. Good luck rebuilding what took 2 decades to perfect. AC Hour 6 brought the vendors. Major suppliers calling to confirm orders that showed up as canceled in their systems. Customers demanding explanations for shipments that never left the warehouse. The compliance system that automatically generated regulatory reports for 3 different government agencies had missed its daily filing deadline for the first time in 8 years. Hour 7, the first contractor arrived. Expensive consultant wearing a fleece vest and holding a travel mug, looking like he only understood systems built after 2020. Brooke ushered him into the server room like she was presenting the Ark of the Covenant. "Austin's files should be in there," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the blinking racks. He plugged in his laptop, tapped a few keys, then frowned like a man realizing his hourly rate wasn't high enough for this kind of disaster. "I'm going to need root access," he said. "Ma'am, I can't reset a system I'm not authorized to touch. It's access encrypted. The credential trees are all tied to one account. Austin TL7 admin root. This is custom architecture. Even the reboot commands bounce without signature verification." He left 30 minutes later with a free branded notepad and a haunted look in his eyes. Hour 8, the board called an emergency meeting. Stock price had dropped 12% since market open. Major customers were threatening breach of contract clauses. The union was demanding answers about the production shutdown. Local news had picked up the story about the mystery systems failure at one of the county's largest employers. That's when they tried calling me, straight to voicemail. The message I'd recorded that morning was simple and professional. "You've reached Austin Cooper. I'm currently unavailable. If this is regarding Atlas, please refer to the documentation provided." "Oh wait, you fired the documentation. Have a great day." They tried texting, read receipts, then nothing. Because Austin wasn't hiding in some dark basement plotting revenge like a movie villain. He was sitting in a corner office downtown, signing paperwork with the company's biggest client. New title, Chief Technology Officer. New salary, 40% raise. New mission, helping their biggest competitor build the systems that would put his former employer out of business within 6 months. At exactly 5:01 p.m., 8 hours and 18 minutes after I'd left my badge on that conference table, every executive received the same email. Subject line, Atlas. Final certification, purge executed. Reference ID, Austin certified. The message was clinical, professional, per contractual auto-expiry protocol, root admin key. Austin certified has now been fully purged. Recovery requires physical reauthorization from the original certifying agent. This process is irreversible. Then Slack lit up one final time, not a message from someone, from the system. Atlas. The last breath of a ghost they'd tried to erase. Good luck. You had 8 hours. The room went dead silent, because everyone finally understood this wasn't sabotage, this was subtraction. You remove the spine, the body falls. Austin hadn't just walked away, he'd walked through them, and when he left, he took gravity with him.